Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host that hasn't been here in a while, Mike Anguilano. Joining me this week are my two stable co-hosts who have been here, Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson. Fellas, we're all a little sick / hungover, but how are we doing? We're like 2 weeks away from Media Day already. It's already the middle of September. I left the country, came back, and basically almost missed the whole month.
Look, I know, and we're happy you're feeling better, COVID boy. But it's good to have you back, and hope you enjoyed your, travails through Europe. Hope you had a good time. It's happy to have you back, bud.
Yeah, the boys are here. I think we're all kind of hobbling on one leg right now, but we're all here, and that's what matters the most, is that all three of us were able to convene for this this week's episode, which is always a good time when the full squad's here. So we're going to continue our divisional breakdown this week. I'm really looking forward to it. I thought Jasper and I did a really good job breaking down the Pacific Division last week. So if you're listening to this one here today, you didn't check out last week's, obviously go check it out on, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you listen to your podcast, the feed's there. Definitely go check it out. And hopefully we've got a good preview, a good show lined up for today.
We certainly do. Today, we'll be previewing the Northwest Division, which, I think the general NBA fan, if you ask them what teams are in what division, I don't necessarily know if they would even know all of the teams that are in each division, because they've kind of phased out the whole meaning of divisions. But nonetheless, we'll be going through the Northwest Division, which currently houses the defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets. But before we break down that and all of the teams in that division, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this week, and that is BetOnline. Football is back, and BetOnline is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info, with all the up to the minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on stats, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to the college football playoff and the Super Bowl, BetOnline gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device. Get in on the action. Just make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that promo code is BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. The defending champion Denver Nuggets headline the Northwest Division. So I think we're going to start there. Makes the most sense. The Nuggets went 53-29 last year. They defeated the Heat 4-1 in the finals. Nikola Jokic is obviously arguably the best player in the NBA. He's an all-star MVP finalist. As it happens with many championship caliber teams, they did suffer some losses. They lost Bruce Brown to the Indiana Pacers. They lost Jeff Green. They lost Thomas Bryant. They retained DeAndre Jordan for some unknown reason. And they retained Reggie Jackson, former Piston Reggie Jackson. The Nuggets are probably have the, it looks like they're tied with the Celtics for the best odds to win the 2023-24 championship. as they should be. The defending champs should get that cred. But Denver is, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say about them. They are loaded with talent. Jamal Murray is healthy and was on full display in the playoffs. Bruce Brown and Jeff Green are kind of difficult to replace, but they have Christian Brown, and they've got, obviously, Jokic down in the middle. Fellas, the Denver Nuggets, they are the best team in this division for sure. They're a team that's going to be back in the playoffs. They're a team that's, going to be angling for another championship, just as they did last year.
Yeah, I think when you're an NBA team, you're a playoff team, you're a championship team, you tend to lose some guys towards not having enough cap space to keep the band together, to run it back, especially as, you're not a big market team. Maybe your owner's not willing to go over the tax, or there's other implications. Denver couldn't afford to keep Bruce Brown with the rest of the roster that they had. And so he's their big loss. A lot of people are going to be saying, can Denver repeat, get back to where they were with losing Bruce Brown, losing Jeff Green? And yes, those are important losses, especially Bruce Brown. I mean, he was phenomenal throughout the playoffs, had a really good regular season as well, did a lot of nice things for them. But Christian Brown's ready to take that next step. And they did a really good job in the draft, grabbing guys that could conceivably play for them next year. Julian Strawther was a guy that I really was liking for Detroit with their second round pick when we were talking about options for them in round 2. So they got a nice player in him. He can shoot, has some decent size, can score a little bit. Jalen Pickett's another nice name from Penn State. And then Hunter Tyson's a guy that from the Denver circle is apparently drawing some pretty strong reviews. So, I know people might focus on that for Denver. Most importantly, they still have their absolute pillar in Nikola Jokic, and Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon are their, second and third pieces. So losing Bruce Brown, important. It's a tough loss, but they did a nice job in doing what good teams have to end up doing, which is using those late first round picks, buying second round picks to find roster guys that can actually play for you. Teams have to do it, and it looks like Denver did a good job this offseason in the draft, getting guys that are ready to play. And Christian Brown was a guy last year who, Denver was 10 deep. They had to find minutes for him because he was just too good to not be in the rotation, even as a rookie, even on a championship level team in Denver. So, I think Denver absolutely should be a favorite once again to win the title. They have arguably the best player in the league. They kept all of their top players outside of Bruce Brown, but they had a strong enough offseason, and they have a great coach, a great foundation. Denver's going to be right back into the top, and what they did last year was absolutely special. It was absolutely electric, and I'm expecting a very similar season from Denver, being right in the mix for a title run. It's very hard to go back to back, but they'll definitely be in the mix in my mind.
Yeah, this is a team that really, it just feels like injuries are the only thing that's going to stop them from making another deep playoff run. Totally. Losing Bruce Brown, that was big. His defense in the playoffs, his ability to get to the rack, he had some big shots for them, and he can rebound a little bit, he can pass a little bit. That's definitely a loss. But like you said, with another year of Christian Brown, like another year of development from him, he's going to be 22, still a young kid, but really with a lot of talent and upside. Look, anytime you have a championship team and you're able to bring back your top 5 players, there's really just no reason to overthink something like that from an analytic perspective. Like, that's going to be one of the best teams in the league, if not the best team in the league. Once again, truly, I actually am kind of surprised that the Celtics are tied with them for the best odds to win the championship, because while Kristaps Porzingis is an excellent player, you look at those respective rosters and what those teams have been able to do with their rosters. This is just just a really, really good team. And like we mentioned with Jamal Murray, I mean, we are going on this is the 3rd playoff run he's made. He's played 53 playoff games in his career. He's averaging 25, 6, and 5. Like, and it's not just he's putting up these numbers. He's shooting 43, 40, 90. Like, the guy is just a killer. So this is a team that can absolutely. I didn't think Michael Porter Jr. had a very good playoff run. So, yeah, it's not great, especially a team that really got, through, I think, a team like the Suns because of their wing depth. Like that, you could just see, like, it's weird to say, but like Kevin Durant was not enough for the Phoenix Suns to overcome Nikola Jokic in the post. So I think when I look at this team, yeah, another year of Brown. If Michael Porter Jr. can do a little bit more in the playoffs, I don't see there is any reason why this team should not be considered one of the absolute, if not the favorite to win the championship again.
Jasper, I'm kind of surprised that they're not the standalone favorites to win the title. I mean, every key piece is back, and you have probably the best player in basketball. They were such a well-oiled machine last year. I mean, they had 1 month where they had more than 5 losses in a month once. Every other month, they were just absolutely incredible. Never finished below 500 in a month outside of April, when they were resting a few guys ahead of the playoffs. This team bringing back all of the veterans is an excellent point. Like, they're bringing back all of their core pieces and are coming off of a championship. It's really hard to envision them taking any sort of step back. It's a group that feels so close. They are a core that over the years has remained together, and that's something that we don't see in the NBA nowadays. We don't see players stick together. We don't see GMs keep rosters together and coaches together through playoff losses, falling short in playoff series that maybe you were anticipating being able to win. But Denver has pretty much kept all of the core pieces around. They stuck with Jamal Murray through his injuries and allowed him to come back at his own pace and allowed him to rehab. I mean, there was talk, not this last season, but the year before that, about Jamal Murray coming back and him not being comfortable, him not being ready yet. And they waited until last year, and he came back, and he was oh so good for them down the stretch, especially in the playoffs. So very, very high on Denver. It's going to be very interesting to see them run it back with this group and see if all of the patience that they have had with this group is going to continue to pay off. And I do think it will. I mean, it's hard to predict who will win the championship again, but as I've already said, Denver is a clear-cut favorite and will absolutely be in the mix, bearing any significant health issues.
Last thing I'll say really quick is that, like, if there is one reason to doubt them, it is losing some of that depth. That was a big reason why they appeared to truly, like, cruise through the playoffs at time last year. It did not really feel like any team was able to truly push them, and I think a big part of that was because they were so deep, especially on the wings, and they were just able to keep coming at you. Losing that, I think, is definitely going to have an effect on their team. But like you said, with another year of Brown, Julian Strawther, this is a team that also is like in a position where they can trade future picks during the trade deadline if they really do need more depth. So I wouldn't be worried about it at all. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Denver. I just think that's a damn good team, and there's no reason.
No, definitely not. And, they do have some guys who have injury histories. Jamal Murray's had a bit of an injury history. Michael Porter Jr. has a pretty extensive injury history as well. So there's definitely concern there. But, Aaron made a great point. It's not often that championship teams, not just championship caliber, championship winning teams retain their top 4 players year over year. It's just not. It's just not really common. I mean, and to have them so young as well with Murray and with Porter, it's going to be probably their Western Conference to lose again. They should be favored to win the West again, just because of the retainment of those high-end players. So it'll be interesting to watch them again, kind of adapt to losing some of that depth. But yeah, they have the flexibility with additional picks and other assets to move. If they need to swing for another core bench piece at the deadline, they certainly have the ability to do that. Let's move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who finished second in the division last season, 8th in the Western Conference. They did make the playoffs. They beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. They were beaten by those Nuggets in the first round, 4-1. Anthony Edwards is the talk of really the NBA right now after his play in the World Cup with Team USA. But they also have, of course, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, who missed a significant portion of last year due to an injury. They acquired Leonard Miller, who was one of the sort of prospects that fell in the draft. They also signed Shake Milton, and they signed Troy Brown Jr. They re-signed Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Pistons, much maligned Pistons big Luka Garza, and they extended Naz Reid at 3 years, $42 million. So they're an interesting group of guys that for like a year and a half now, it seemed like, we talk about consolidation moves. Yeah, this is what you don't do. They consolidated for Rudy Gobert when they already had Karl Anthony Towns, and it has not paid off. In fact, it could be one of the worst moves in the NBA when it's all said and done. But they did it. They did their consolidation move. They got Gobert. He hasn't quite played to what he was in Utah right now. There's still an adjustment period. They've had to cycle through point guards between D'Angelo Russell and Mike Conley. So they're kind of shuffling the deck on that end to see who fits next to Anthony Edwards. This is a team that seems like they're on the cusp of having to move Karl Anthony Towns, because they're very limited on what they can acquire. They're very limited on their assets because of the Gobert trade. They're very limited with who they can acquire to sort of bolster this team. I mean, all that star power, they went 42-40 last year. So the Timberwolves, to me, seem like a team that is primed to have to make an uncomfortable decision, because you're not going to trade Gobert for even half of what you gave up to get him. So I feel like they kind of have to ride that wave out. But Karl Anthony Towns, a little younger, a little more offensively versatile, has his injury history too, but a much better player. Seems like they're a team that might have to make some tough decisions come middle of the year if they're not playing well again, or if they're middling, maybe a game or two under or over 500. They're just Jasper, you said it was depressing to write this in the notes, and it certainly has felt that way for like 18 months now, just trying to figure out what the Wolves are.
I mean, this is one of the most frustrating franchises in the entire league. Perhaps the most frustrating franchise in the entire league. Because, of course, you mentioned their stars, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards. But they also have Mike Conley, who can still play. And they have Jaden McDaniels, who, in my opinion, is one of the best young power forwards, defensively speaking, in the game, and growing a lot offensively. I mean, he's really more of a wing at this point. He's just that versatile defensively. He's a good player. And yeah, you look up and down this roster and you go, what's the issue here? Because they also have, Kyle Anderson on the roster too, another guy who I love. And yet it just seems like every year it's the same thing with them. And it doesn't matter who they trade for. It doesn't matter who's on the roster. It's just mediocrity once again. That being said, I do think they did address some of their bigger issues. We really saw it in the game against the Pistons. That's one I really think of. Their backup guard situation was not good last year. Like, Jalen Noel was just not getting it done for them. And bringing in somebody like Shake Milton, who is really solid, especially on the defensive end of things where I think their defense had a lot of problems. Obviously Rudy Gobert was not the Rudy Gobert they traded for last year, but a big part of that was because I didn't think that, they had enough guards that could really stop penetration at times. Bringing in somebody like Nickeil Alexander-Walker too, like those are guys that are really good shooters. I like Troy Brown Jr., like what he can bring coming off the bench as a replacement for Taurean Prince, let's say. I do think again that this, like, you look at this roster and you go, oh, that's a team that should at least be in the mid-high 40s. But then you go out every year and Karl Anthony Towns puts up the numbers, but you don't really see the results, and they keep on moving around who they want to play at shooting guard, and it never quite really works out. And I don't know. It's hard to get excited about this team, even though on paper they should be one of the most exciting teams in the NBA just based on who's on them. It's tough. I have to say, like, I don't see things necessarily changing all that much for them. Maybe because of that better guard depth, better integration in terms of Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert playing together. Maybe they get up to like 45 wins. I could see that. But I could also, like you said, completely see this falling apart and, them having to blow it up with Karl Anthony Towns when they're already in a position where they owe Utah not just this year's first round pick. They owe the 25, the 26, the 27, and the 2029 first round picks as well. So this is a team that, something's got to work out for them soon, or they could be in real trouble, even though they have one of the most exciting high upside young players in the NBA in Anthony Edwards on their roster. They're playing a dangerous game right now.
I think you guys are right in having, the pessimistic thoughts towards Minnesota that seemingly everyone has, and it's for the right reasons, like you guys explained. I will try to be a little bit more optimistic and say something that's very important for Minnesota is that they did not have Jaden McDaniels in the playoffs last year. He got hurt towards the end of the regular season, and that is a guy that, especially last year, was playing so well, especially on the defensive end, but was also showing meaningful improvement on the offensive side of the court. That's a guy that still has a lot of potential and is the type of guy that could help Minnesota figure out some of the issues that were so apparent for them. Getting him back and him taking a step in his game is very, very important, but it's obviously not as important as, is this the year that Anthony Edwards takes the official leap into superstardom that I think everyone knows he's capable of. It was on full display this summer with Team USA in the FIBA World Cup, but Anthony Edwards does have that the guy feel to him, and just signing that big extension to stay in Minnesota, like, this is the year you would like to see him take that leap. And if he does, that could be enough to get Minnesota 3 to 4 more wins this year and take them from a play-in team to potentially something like a 6 seed. And that's not great. Like, they were obviously 2 years ago pushing Memphis to 7 and looked like they were on the cusp of being that next team to take a big leap. And last year they kind of reverted and regressed, but there is still a lot of good stuff in Minnesota. It's just a matter of, can Anthony Edwards be a superstar, which I think he can. With Jaden McDaniels back, what type of leap can he make? What type of growth can he make on the offensive side of the court? Will he be a consistent enough three-point shooter? Can he do a little bit more off the ball so where he's not just stuck in the corner? And can they figure out a better way to make Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert pair together and play with the rest of that group? And we saw some good things in that 5-man lineup of Mike Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Karl Anthony Towns, and Gobert. In the regular season last year, it had a positive net rating, but we didn't get to see it in the playoffs because of the McDaniels injury. I think Mike Conley is probably a better player for this team, probably a better floor general point guard for this team than D'Angelo Russell was. So I am going to say that I think Minnesota will be better than they were last year. I really think last year they were about as bad as they could be, and they still were able to make the playoffs. So you've got to hope that with getting Jaden McDaniels back, you're going to have Mike Conley for a full year now, and hopefully you're able to address some of the pairing concerns, the lineup configurations, the spacing configurations with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert on the court together. I think there's reason to be a bit more optimistic about what Minnesota can do. At the same time, I will be realistic and say they're limited in what they can do, because I don't believe, even if Anthony Edwards does take that leap to superstardom, he's going to be enough to lift them towards being, a top 3, top 4 team in the West, unless everything goes right for them. And that's asking a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say this, not to be all doom and gloom. I think when you're in a position with their draft picks like they are, making that trade for Leonard Miller, like, that's a smart move. You have to take swings for the fences, and that's a guy who definitely slipped and, might not be something. There's definitely downside there, but there's also a lot of upside, and that's the kind of move that you have to make when you're in a position like they're in. I also really thought the Naz Reid signing was that was a really good move, in my opinion. Pistons fans won't like to hear this, but I think I'd rather have Naz Reid for 3 years, $42 million than Isaiah Stewart at 4 years, $60 million. I'm just sorry to say it. When you look at them, I just think I'd rather have Naz Reid. So I thought that was a smart move too. And there is definitely upside here. They did probably play as bad as they could have last year, and like you said, they still were over 500 and were able to make the playoffs, not without difficulty, but still, they would have made the playoffs even if the play-in wasn't a thing. They finished 8th in the Western Conference. So, I totally think 6 seed, that's definitely doable for them. It's just, I think you make a move for Gobert to win a championship, and I have a hard time seeing that coming in.
That's an interesting point you made about Isaiah Stewart. I would probably also rather have Naz Reid at that number than Isaiah Stewart, just because I think more of what you're getting with Naz Reid. He's filled a role for the Wolves for a little while now, and was effective at the things that he, the team knows what he's good at and has put him in a role to succeed. I don't necessarily know if you have that with Isaiah Stewart. I think they're still trying to figure out if he can shoot, if he can be a stretch 4. That's an interesting comparison. I honestly didn't do that. I know there were several teams that were lining up to sign Naz Reid, and I know the Cavs had inquired on him at free agency as well, but it's a sneaky good move to keep Naz Reid. The lineups that he was in last year with the Wolves, I mean, they were pretty solid lineups overall. I mean, he mostly played with the reserves, but the lineup last year of D'Angelo Russell, Edwards, McDaniels, Slow-Mo at the 4, and Naz Reid had a differential plus 9.3 in 200 possessions. So most of the lineups, I think, with him in it were pretty positive, and he's had to fill in. But interesting point about comparing it to the contract between him and Isaiah Stewart. I would probably also rather have Naz Reid as well, just because I think he understands his role and capabilities a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. In the Naz Reid, Isaiah Stewart scenario, just with the money and the contract, I think Naz Reid is just as good, if not better, than Stewart. But yeah, that's a good contract. I think Minnesota, they can really only go up compared to how bad things seem to go for them last year. And when everyone seems to be down on them, it seems like they're trending in such a bad direction. Again, they can really only go up unless things totally implode inside that locker room. or, there's a significant injury and guys like Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns been significant time again. But I think there's some reason to be a little bit more optimistic about them. I think their offseason was pretty good for the cap situation and the pick situation that they're in. They could only do so much without, sending away someone like Anthony Edwards, which just wasn't going to happen. So, yeah, I'm a little bit more optimistic, I think, than the general crowd is on Minnesota. And this is an interesting division this year because there's some other teams that are just as capable of improving, and maybe there are expectations for them to take a leap just as much as a team like Minnesota should.
Yeah, absolutely. And that team is, probably one of the more exciting teams across the league. And that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they went 40-42. They've been the punchline of many draft pick acquisition jokes for the last 3 years or so, while Sam Presti has pretty much pillaged every team in some way by getting a draft choice in the near future from almost everybody. But they won 16 more games last season than they did in the season prior. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a star. Led Canada to bronze medal, but he was awesome last year, and he's on the up and up as a potential top 5 player in the league at some point. They made some okay additions. I mean, I think with this team, it was always going to be the biggest improvement year over year would come from their internal growth because they have so many young guys. But they did get Davis Bertans. They drafted Cason Wallace and Keontae George. They didn't have Chet Holmgren at all last year. They'll get him back this year. He'll make his NBA debut. And then I guess for just funsies, they also got Victor Oladipo from the Heat, but I would be surprised if he plays. He suffered an injury to his knee in the playoffs and will probably keep him out for all of the season. Most of, if not all of the season. Again, they went 40-42 last year. They're a very young team, spearheaded by one of the best young players in the league, in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, they're an interesting team. They've got all the components. They've got all the draft capital to go get a disgruntled star and really start to mess up the league. Talk about a team that's ready to make a consolidation move. They have a ton of draft capital and some very tradable contracts. So, and of course, playing with Shai is enticing for anybody. They have Josh Giddey, who showed some impressive growth last year as well. Still have Lou Dort. I mean, they have a plethora of young, talented players and draft capital to go out and try to get a high-end star and to sort of glue everything together. To me, they should be better than 40-42, assuming everything keeps heading in the direction that it was heading in last year.
Yeah, the Thunder are certainly one of the most intriguing teams to watch next season in terms of that group of teams that could realistically make a leap. And I think you've got 3 or so teams in this division that kind of fall in that big grouping. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an absolute star. Made the All-Star team last year. Absolutely incredible in the FIBA World Cup. He is a star. They have a franchise cornerstone piece, and there was talk before. It's gone now, but there was talk in previous seasons about trading SGA to get more draft capital as this team tries to, build to the draft and yada, yada, yada. SGA has completely cemented himself as their guy. He's more important than any draft pick they could possibly have. And this upcoming season for them, it's very, very easy to see them taking a significant jump. Chet Holmgren, who is my favorite to win Rookie of the Year, is going to make his NBA debut. He is exactly what the Oklahoma City Thunder need. Jalen Williams had a good rookie season, and Jalen Williams, the center, not the guard, who was phenomenal last year, mind you, in his rookie season. But OKC needed an interior presence. Chet Holmgren is going to give a great pick and roll partner for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as well as having the makings of a very good rim protector down low for the Oklahoma City Thunder defense. I think he is going to make a gigantic impact for them, and I think him having that season to just kind of watch everything around him, put on some muscle. I believe the number's like 11 pounds of muscle for compared to last year or something like that. But
let's go. That's my favorite. Oh my God.
yes,
I
added 20 pounds of muscle.
It's my favorite thing. Oh, I love dude. Oh, that's my favorite storyline who lost 15 pounds of fat, who gained 15 pounds of muscle, and why is it not going to change their game whatsoever? I love it, man. Ever since the days of Disagana Jop, I bought into Disagana Jop because he added 20 pounds of muscle in an offseason one time. Yo.
Back to what I was saying with OKC taking a leap. Like, they just have so many guys that are going to be better than what they were last year, or in Chet Holmgren's case, you're adding him to the mix. There's just so much internal development that's to be expected. They're a very deep team with a lot of different guys that can give them minutes. I mean, Kenrick Williams was a guy last year who was hurt, but when he's on the court, can have a positive impact. Like, you just go up and down the roster, and there's so many different names where you're like, that guy can play. Like Isaiah Joe, another guy where, like, he might not be the most known name in the NBA, but that guy is an absolute microwave type player, shoots the heck out of the basketball, like, is just another really good player that the team has. And yeah, Oklahoma City, I mean, they have been through so many different roster iterations, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, to Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Carmelo Anthony. Then there was the Oklahoma City Thunder year with CP3. Like, then it was the tank years. And hell, we haven't even mentioned Josh Giddey, who was also phenomenal in FIBA World Cup play with Australia. Like, this Thunder team has so many names, so many young guys. They have a star in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Ousmane Dieng is another guy who showed some flashes last year. He could take another big leap. He's a 6'10" forward with some size. Like, man, the Thunder are really going to be exciting. And another team I'm absolutely expecting to be better than they were last season.
Yeah, when it comes to talent, there's no question. I mean, you just added the guy who was the number 2 overall pick in the draft 2 years ago, in Chet Holmgren. So that's just simply a tremendous addition to your roster. I think if there's one question I really have about the Thunder, it's got to be, first off, how do these pieces necessarily fit together? What are the roles going to look like? Because like you said, there's so many players on this roster where you go, whoa, Josh Giddey, whoa, Lou Dort. I mean, like, Lou Dort is still a thing. Don't forget. You look at somebody like Jalen Williams, who looked like a future star himself, absolutely deserved to be third. And really, truly, honestly, like, he was in contention for Rookie of the Year last year. He was up there. It was not just a throwaway conversation to be had. He was awesome. And when you look at that team, though, I just think there's so many pieces that you really want to see what they are. Like you said, SGA is a star, but how does that maybe conflict with Josh Giddey's rising star? How does that maybe conflict with Jalen Williams' rising star, with Chet Holmgren's rising star? So I think seeing how those pieces fit together, I'm excited, but I don't want to be one of those guys who goes, oh, look at all this. Like, they made that leap. 16 more wins in one season is impressive. Something Pistons fans would be absolutely killing for. But I think also when you look at them in terms of health, SGA hasn't played 70 games in 3 years. And part of that is because of tanking, but it is a question. When it comes down to Chet Holmgren, like you said, my favorite storyline, he added a lot of muscle, but there are still questions about a guy with his frame and his height and how healthy he can stay. I don't think that they're superfluous questions to be had. So I think there is definitely the upside here for like 45 wins. I could see it. I could also kind of see them stagnating a little bit as they just kind of try and figure out what they are and exactly how these pieces fit together. And then maybe next year, after making some off-season moves, in-season moves, maybe then they're able to take really more of that next step into being a contender.
They're a league pass team to me, for sure. Just because of Chet coming back with all of the talent that they already have, they're going to be a very fun team. They're going to be a team to watch. I think, again, at the deadline, if some star comes out and says, I'm unhappy, get me out of here, and they're sort of hanging around at 2 games over 500, 3, 4, 5 games over 500 or whatever, they have the pieces. They can go in and pretty much snatch up whoever they want that comes out and says, I'm unhappy with my team. I'd like to be traded. And we know how that goes in the NBA. And we are going to get to the biggest offender of that right now. And that would be the Portland Trailblazers. So Portland, it's almost impossible to really preview the Trailblazers upcoming season because the league-wide headlining story is that Damian Lillard is probably going to be traded, and if he's not traded, then there's a bigger NFL or a NBA Players Association problem. So it still hasn't been resolved. We've been talking about Dame seemingly for months. He wanted out. He didn't want out. He wanted out. And then finally he officially asked to be traded. It's hard to preview the Blazers knowing that that's kind of lingering because that's going to completely alter the makeup of their team one way or the other. But they also added Scoot Henderson, one of the most highly touted prospects in several years. They drafted Chris Murray as well. They did lose quite a few pieces along the end of their bench. They traded away Josh Hart and Gary Payton last year, in addition to losing Drew Eubanks, Justice Winslow, and Cam Reddish. They kept Matisse Thybulle at 3 years, $33 million. They kept Jeremy Grant at 5 years, $160 million, which came prior to Damian Lillard asking out. And the word on the rumor mill is that they're not going to move Grant. He's going to stick around for the eventual rebuild. But the dark cloud hanging over the organization is that Damian Lillard is on his way out. Whatever return the Blazers get will likely not be nearly enough, but it's just the nature of asking for a trade and strongly hinting that you want to go to one particular team in particular. It's very hard to evaluate the Portland Trailblazers. I mean, I still think even with Scoot and Grant and Shaedon Sharpe, they're going to be a fun team to watch. They're going to sneak up on some unsuspecting team in February and just wallop them. But then the other 81 games, they're probably going to be really, really bad in some capacity. So, guys, what are your thoughts on the Blazers, knowing that it's really an untenable situation until Damian Lillard's issue is resolved?
Yeah, I mean, look, Scoot, Shaedon Sharpe, that in and of itself is enough reason to watch this team for at least a few games this season, even if you're not a Trailblazers fan. That being said, this is going to be a bad team. I just have such a hard time seeing this team be very good. You look at, their losses in Drew Eubanks, and I know Drew Eubanks is not a guy that you're thinking of as being a huge loss, but who do they have to back up Yusuf Nurkic? Like, who is going to do that? And who can even be their backup or their, center who can stick with more, nimble centers on other teams? Nurkic can't do that, not at this point in his career with his injury history. So, Jeremy Grant, obviously still really good. He was awesome for them last year, but this team is going to have so many flaws, so many holes. Even if they do get something back for Dame Lillard in terms of players and not just picks, it's hard to see a trade package that they're going to be able to put together that's really going to elevate them. I mean, he's 33 years old, and it is what it is at this point. There's just not as much of a demand for aging stars in the trade market right now. We're seeing it with James Harden as well. So they're in a bit of a tough position here. That being said, I thought they nailed the draft. I thought Chris Murray was a great addition. I thought that Scoot Henderson was obviously a great addition. And look, I still like Anthony Simons. Like, I think he's something. And, Matisse Thybulle could give him a little something as well. Shaedon Sharpe is a guy that you absolutely have to be excited about in the future, too. So while they're not going to be good, I don't think it's perhaps as much of a long-term doom and gloom situation as some people are painting it out to be. It is going to hurt to lose Damian Lillard for more than what he would, equivalently to like what he's still able to give you on the court. But like, the rebuild's got to happen. They do have pieces in place for it. It's not like they have a whole bunch of future first-round picks that they threw away in trades, like, say, the Minnesota Timberwolves did. So I think they're in a good position to kind of jumpstart this rebuild, even if Damian Lillard does not get traded for a big package, or God forbid, Damian Lillard doesn't get traded at all. I still think they're going to be bad regardless, but like, it's not the worst situation in the world.
Yeah, it's difficult to really gauge the season ahead for Portland until we know what they are getting back for Damian Lillard. I really do like the young guys that they have. Like, I think Scoot is an all-star guy. Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simon, two other guards that have good upside. Simon's a little bit older now, but like still a very young player. Saw him get a bigger opportunity last year, and he had some really, really big performances. So they have those three guys that they can start to build around. They have a couple other younger pieces that are at least intriguing. Like Nasir Little he's had some good moments. Like there's reason to believe he's going to have that opportunity and can continue to get better. Like I like that they drafted Chris Murray. They're a team that doesn't have maybe a ton of guys on the wing or bigs that are for sure pieces for their future. Like a lot of their pieces are guards. So he's a guy that's going to get a lot of opportunity this year when Jeremy Grant's not on the court. They need to get off Damian Lillard, though. Like, it sucks that this situation has become what it is. I think if you're an NBA fan, you wanted Damian Lillard to finish his career in Portland. He was really one of those final guys that it seems like that's the type of player. He's talked about loyalty so much. That's going to be one of those few guys, those few stars that stick with a team for their entire career, which is just, it's something you don't see in today's NBA. And for the situation to become as untenable as it is, it makes the breakup that much harder to swallow. But it's like, you just got to get it over with at this point. And it's tough for Portland because you don't want to just trade Damian Lillard to trade him and get nothing back. He's still a star in this league. He's still a top player in this league. They should be able to get value for him, but the situation is just so difficult. And it's hanging over that franchise's head, and it's unfortunately going to until the day he's off the team. So they need to try to get some value for him. They should be able to try to get some value for him. But I do like the young pieces that are on this roster. I think they have some guys that they can confidently build with and around, and they're going to be able to give all the minutes in the world to those guys this upcoming season. So, yeah, am I expecting Portland to be good? Absolutely not. But they could be fun because the guys that they have are athletic, can run, can score. They should be able to get up and down and at least still be competitive with some of the veterans that they have on the roster too, with Grant and Nurkic. And, again, are they winning 40 games? No, but they can be competitive. They can get up and down the court, and they're going to have some highlight plays throughout the year that are going to have us talking about the bright future that this Portland group has.
Ryan Rupert was one of your guys too, right? Coming out of the draft, or am I misremembering?
That might have been one of Mike's guys. That was one of the names that I didn't know a ton about, but they at least have some names, and they at least have some guys that are going to be young and they can throw out there and just see what they got, and they're going to have that opportunity to develop on the fly. So it's a sucky situation in Portland. Like, I can't imagine that the Trailblazers fans are happy that Damian Lillard wants out, even though they never got to, the conference finals or the NBA championship. Like, I get that can be frustrating, but there's no one in their right mind that wants to lose Damian Lillard. But at least they have enough young guys that they're going to be able to go throw out there into the fire and see what they can do on a nightly basis and think about their potential moving forward.
They did make the conference.
They did.
They made one conference finals run.
They got swept by Golden State, but yes,
they
dominated.
Unforgettable one. That's right.
Yeah, it was a big one. Like, they just never. But like, your overall statement is kind of correct. Like, even when they did make it to the conference finals, they were not at the same level of Golden State, like at even close. And truly, like, there are a lot of exciting pieces, but with that big man rotation, that situation there, they're just simply not going to win a lot of games this year. It's just not going to happen. Like, you can't win games with that big man rotation. So they'll be fun. They'll be exciting. There is a reason to be hopeful if you're a Blazers fan, and I think when you're losing a franchise player like Damian Lillard, the fact that you can have hope for the future is about the best you can ask for. So, it's not going to be pretty for a couple years, but I think they've put themselves in a good.
It's hard to be too upset, considering they did get Scoot Henderson. That's a big deal. The Cavs, when they lost LeBron the second time, sort of had to rely on that Brooklyn Nets pick that they got from Boston, which turned into Colin Sexton. And getting Scoot is a significantly better consolation prize. And it's sort of a light at the end of the tunnel as opposed to Colin Sexton. No offense to Colin Sexton. But he is a guy that is already trying to be shopped by the Utah Jazz. And that's the final team in the Northwest Division.
Ooh, that transition.
I didn't lose a step, even though I sound like I lost a lot of steps.
Did I completely miss us talking about?
Wait, what?
Did I completely miss us talking?
Yes, you did. You must have been asleep because I skipped. I went right to Portland because we were talking about Dame.
Yep, but now it's time to talk about another
superstar
guard. That's right, Colin Sexton.
No, I actually thought you were going to say Jordan Clarkson, who just went off in the World Cup as well. But the Utah Jazz, 37-45 last year. The record is deceiving because until they decided to shut everybody down, they were one of the most surprising teams in the NBA, led by Lauri Markkanen, all-star last year. He was starter. He played out of his freaking mind for pretty much the entire season until he got injured later on. Played out of his freaking mind. They traded Mitchell. They traded Gobert. They still went 37-45. Talk about a team that has a ton of draft capital, much like the Thunder. The Utah Jazz have a ton of draft capital from both Minnesota and Cleveland. So with Markkanen being, basically turning into Lowry Bird, they also got John Collins, acquired for basically nothing from the Atlanta Hawks. They drafted Taylor Hendricks, which is a name that we talked about quite a bit in our pre-draft podcasts. They drafted Bryce Sensabaugh as well. And they re-signed Jordan Clarkson. 37-45. Oh, also Walker Kessler he played basically as well as Rudy Gobert did defensively, and comes at a fraction of the cost and still has more upside. So between all of that, between Markkanen and Kessler and Jordan Clarkson playing out of his mind, as I said, the Utah Jazz really pivoted from the Gobert-Mitchell pairing and come out of it with copious amounts of draft capital. Ochai Agbaji was awfully good last year. They acquired Taylor Horton-Tucker, who played okay when he was with Utah, and they still have Colin Sexton, who I said earlier they're already trying to trade, but they have a lot of flexibility in terms of draft pieces. They have very tradable contracts, and they have a pretty good, solid young core that, I mean, probably played much, much better than I think anybody expected and is probably due for some regression back to the mean. But, they went out and added some shooters. They added a shooter who is also a big, and they added John Collins, who gives that team some bounce. So, guys, what do you think about the Utah Jazz? They were a really interesting team that we all thought was going to be complete garbage after they moved on from their two best players. But instead, we're basically a playoff team and for the first 75% of the season before they kind of shut everybody down. But what are you expecting from them this upcoming season?
The Jazz were my league pass team last year. I watched an odd amount of Utah Jazz basketball last year, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I really, really like the offseason that Utah had. My only question for this team is, who is going to be their starting point guard? Are they going to throw Keontae George into the fire? Is it going to be Taylor Horton-Tucker, who started for them at the end of last season and had some big performances? Even someone like Chris Dunn, he's not going to start for them at point guard, but another guard who had some pretty decent outings for them last year. This team is going to be so fun, and they have so many guys that have a right to minutes. You look at their forwards, they have obviously Lauri Markkanen. They bring in John Collins. They have Kelly Olynyk back. They just drafted Taylor Hendricks. They have Ochai Agbaji. They have so many guys that have a case for minutes. They're going to be a really, really deep team. That might be a team that makes some sort of consolidation trade because they do have so many guys that can play for them right now. You mentioned it, Mike, but Walker Kessler had a really, really good rookie season, just played in the FIBA World Cup with Team USA. He's a really intriguing piece for them. They have Colin Sexton back and Jordan Clarkson, two guards that can score in bunches and have big, big games in their own right. Simone Fontecchio is another guy that can play. Really, really interesting group, really, really fun group, and really, really competitive group. You said it again, or you said it as well. Their record's deceptive last year. 37-45 sounds like a bad team. They really weren't. They were one of the best offenses in basketball last season. Pulled up a ton of points on the board. If they could get a little bit better defensively, it's very, very easy to see this team taking a leap. And I know I've said that about the Thunder and the Timberwolves today, but the Jazz have a really, really deep roster. Lauri Markkanen's an all-star. He proved he's a guy last year after, really just being considered a salary filler, whatever, to make the Donovan Mitchell trade work. He became a guy, and the Jazz are probably in a better position than they thought they were originally going to be in after that trade. Really fun group, really fun roster. I'm really, really excited to watch the Jazz again this year. I think this is a team that can compete for a playoff spot.
Danny Ainge is a menace.
I was going to say, poor Danny Ainge, he can't lose for winning. He really can't. He literally was doing everything in his power to just lose as many games as possible. And the Jazz just refused to do it. They really did have to basically sit everyone at the end of the year just so that they could avoid even being in contention for the play-in. They were sweating it out, and they still almost made the play-in. So definitely a team that has an exciting young core. I mean, Walker Kessler's awesome. That is a guy that you really could see being the centerpiece of their defense moving forward. Perhaps he's not going to be a multi-time Defensive Player of the Year winner, but I'm not saying it's off the table either. And I think they had a really good draft. Bryce Sensabaugh, it was a little weird that they re-signed Jordan Clarkson after drafting Bryce Sensabaugh, who seems like kind of a natural replacement for him. But that being said, I still think there's time to bring along Sensabaugh slowly. This is still not an organization that is trying to win a lot of games this year. They're still in the same situation where I think they're almost hoping for a little regression from guys like Lauri Markkanen, who played just absolutely out of their minds. But yeah, other interesting young pieces. Simone Fontecchio, like, I got a rep for my Italian guys, so I love having him. They definitely still have flexibility in regards to Colin Sexton. I know he's not a sexy name, but like, he is something. And the addition of John Collins, I think, is going to make you a lot less reliant on Kelly Olynyk, which they definitely were at times last year. He was a guy that played a really big role in terms of initiating their offense and moving the ball around. Like, he was definitely a valuable piece for them. Keontae George, another guy, I really like that. You want to go for a really athletic guard, and that's kind of the guy you got. So they're in really good position. Taylor Hendricks, anyone who listens to this podcast knows how intrigued we were with his skill set. I think they've put themselves into a position where they have, even if something doesn't work out, like John Collins doesn't work out, okay, that's fine. We'll see what Taylor Hendricks has to offer. We move Lauri Markkanen. That's okay. We have replacements for him in John Collins and Kelly Olynyk. So, yeah, this is a team I think you have to be very excited about. I have to disagree with you a little bit, Aaron. I don't think that they're going to be, winning many more games this year. I just don't think that's where the organization's at. But they're definitely a team that is on the upswing. And with the amount of draft capital they have, not just this year, not just next year, moving into 26, 27, and 29, if they do end up continuing to overperform and they want to flip some of those picks into a star that can really solidify the roster, they can do it. So this is a team Danny Ainge has done a really good job with. The only thing is they're just too good. That's his biggest problem.
Yeah, I can't believe he got that much for Gobert and then got another King's ransom for Donovan Mitchell, and then had to sit guys so that they won't make the playoffs because they were intentionally, quote unquote, intentionally trying to not win games to up their draft odds. Insane.
He found a replacement for Gobert literally the same year.
Immediately.
Like, come on, man. What?
Immediately. At a fraction of the cost, and probably with a little more offensive upside, because Gobert was pretty much relying on Donovan Mitchell lobs and putbacks. Crazy.
Yeah. As a Pistons fan, it makes me sick to give Danny Ainge credit for anything, but all right, Danny, good job.
Great. The Wonder Boy. So that's the Utah Jazz. I agree. I think they're an upcoming team. I think they are due for some regression because Lauri Markkanen came out and played completely insane to the point where, they really just had to find ways to sit him. He's probably going to come back closer to earth, closer to what he was with Chicago and Cleveland, but they're still a good young team. And this front office can be opportunistic. Again, much like the Thunder, if a star becomes available, they have the draft capital to go out and, really swing for a, mid-level superstar. That not stud. Like, if you put Damian Lillard on this team, not that this would ever happen, but if you put Damian Lillard on this team with all the draft pieces that the Jazz have and throw Taylor Hendricks in there and, and whatever, at least an interesting team. Assuming that all else stays the same with Kessler and Markkanen. They've got the draft capital to go out and get a star who becomes available, much like Oklahoma City. But I think they'll be a little bit worse this year because I don't expect them to do that. I think they'll be slightly worse. But certainly the future is bright in Utah very quickly after dismantling their previous playoff teams that just got stuck in the...
And last thing I'll say is, like, we haven't talked so much about coaches on these podcasts, but like firing Quinn Snyder, who I think is one of the better X's and O's coaches in the NBA after things kind of fell apart, and immediately replacing him with Will Hardy, who seems, I don't know. We'll see when it comes to coaches. You can get lucky a year or two, but the guy seems like he absolutely has a his finger on the pulse of like how to run an NBA offense. They can scheme things up. Aaron, like you said, they were definitely a league pass team for me. I watched a lot of Utah Jazz last year, and I did not regret my decision. They were just, even when they lost, they were really, really fun to watch. They have great flow to their offense. And I think just being able to like replace a really, really good head coach with another really, really good head coach, that kind of organizational stability goes a really, really long way when you're retooling.
Yeah, I really do think that they could be a playoff team. Like if I look at Bet Online, they're plus 375 to make the playoffs. I would consider sprinkling that. I don't know if I buy into Lauri Markkanen's going to regress, and I think that they got better this offseason. The only thing that concerns me is they really don't have a true point guard with experience that I'd be comfortable saying is, can start for them and be good enough to be, the starting point guard on a playoff team. If they start Keontae George or starting a rookie guards tend to take longer to develop. They have more struggles because the ball's in their hand more. That would probably be my biggest concern with them. But they just have so much depth, and I think that they're going to be better defensively with the offseason that they had. I really think they could make the playoffs. I understand why there's belief they won't, but I really could see it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too high on the Jazz because I watched so much of them last year and really liked them. But I look at their win total at 35.5, and it's really hard for me to believe that they're, projected to either, they're projected to win one more game than they did last year. Like, I just feel they're a better team than that now. Like, John Collins isn't nothing. And I don't know. I guess I'm just too high on the Utah Jazz. Danny Ainge just always wins. So I really don't know if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, you definitely could be. Like, this is a team with a really high variance. I think probably the highest variance of any other team in this division. Arguably, I think, the Timberwolves could also be up there. You could see them really going up or really going down. But this is a team that is in a really fascinating position. They could use a little swap with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like, they have too many power forwards, and the Thunder have kind of too many guards right now. Like, we didn't even talk about Kason Wallace, like the number 10 overall pick for them. They still have Trey Mann on that roster. If I was the Utah Jazz, I think I'd be calling them up and just seeing like, hey, you're not moving on from Giddey. You're not moving on from SGA. Is there a chance you might move on from one of those guys for one of our younger forwards? Who knows?
Yeah, a team ripe for some moves, much like the Pistons are. Guys, that's the Northwest Division. Any other closing thoughts here? This isn't going to be another long podcast. Any other closing thoughts on any teams in this division? We really didn't link it to the Pistons at all too much. It's a Western Conference team. There's not a whole lot to link. I mean, unless you like feeling sad about how many former Pistons just won a championship with Denver. Not a whole lot to link, but any closing thoughts on this division? I think it should be a pretty competitive division. I mean, Denver's head and shoulders above everyone else, but I think, those middle teams, the Jazz, the Thunder, the Wolves, I think all of them could be in the mix in the Western Conference, all with similar seedings. It's going to be a bit of a dogfight there in that middle. The Western Conference is definitely very tough, but those three teams I think are pretty evenly matched, and if things swing one way or the other, they could leapfrog each other in the standings.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Denver's the clear-cut favorite to win the conference, to win the division. But this will be a really fun division because there's a lot of good young players, and like you said, Minnesota, Utah, and Oklahoma City are three really interesting young teams with interesting cores that all are capable of being better, taking a step forward. So should be a really fun division. I like a lot of the young guys in the division, so I'm looking forward to watching some more Thunder games next year. Definitely will be checking out the Jazz, since I pretty much just telling the world that I'm a really big Utah Jazz fan. this week. And the Nuggets, I really enjoyed watching the Nuggets last year. They just played such a high quality, high level game of basketball night in and night out. This division will be a lot of fun.
Aaron Johnson versus Vernon Maxwell, 1-on-1. Who's going to win for the Battle of Utah? No, yeah, I mean, look, you said, Mike, this is going to go a little bit longer, but that's just because all these teams are really interesting and fun to talk about. And, you know, I know some people who are Pistons fans just like to pay attention to the Pistons. I am not one of those guys. I really love to see what's going on around the NBA, and I think that does a good job of informing, you know, your analysis on where the Pistons should go and seeing how the trends and where these teams are and, you know, where you fit into that mix. That's the fun of this stuff. So not necessarily linking it to the Pistons outside of Naz Reid, Isaiah Stewart, but truly, like, this is the fun stuff to talk about for me. I just really love basketball.
Yeah, our one comment on the Pistons was, "Oh, that wasn't that good of a contract." Oh, great. Yeah, very competitive division. The Western Conference in general is going to be super competitive. It'll be really interesting. Even when Dame comes over to the Eastern Conference, it'll still be a complete dogfight in the West. Guys, if no other comments, I'm really glad that I was able to come back. I feel like I missed so much, and with the time changes, I never really got a firm footing to watch or listen to anything, but really nice to be back on the show this week.
You know,
Pleasure to have you back.
Proud of us. I am proud of us, all three of us, with our own injury designations on the injury report, and we came out and we performed and we put together what I would say is a great show. So pleasure as always, fellas.
Michael Jordan's flu game or this podcast, which one was greater? You be the judge.
Right. Let us know in the comments which was better, the COVID hungover game or Michael Jordan's flu game. I know it'll be a pretty tight battle.
The comments are always so nice to us, so I know we'll do
that. Positivity. We love it. We're going to end on that positivity. Guys, thank you so much for joining me back on the Palace of Pistons podcast, and thank all of you for joining us on another divisional preview. The NBA season is right around the corner. We hope that you will be joining us as we get ready to cover the Pistons again. It's already that time of year. For my co-hosts, Aaron Johnson, Jasper Apollonia, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network, and we will see you all next time.